Welcome, everyone. This is More Than Tor, shining a light on different corners of the dark web. If you're looking for a different talk, you're actually in the right one. This is the better one, I promise. So you're going to have to excuse me if I do yawn, because of all the flight delays. I didn't get into the hotel until like 6 a.m., so I'm like dragging. But my name is Benjamin Brown, and my day job is with Veracode, and I'm a principal security researcher there. So some of my focuses lately have been darknets and cryptocurrencies, emerging digital underground economies, public policy, and emerging technology in general, and how can I make it do stuff it wasn't necessarily designed to do, and what are the ramifications of that? I also want to start out with some groundwork, some context in terms of definitions. A lot of times the terms dark net and dark web are used interchangeably, usually by media or law enforcement, but they do have distinct meanings. One actually builds on the other. When I'm talking about dark nets, I'm talking about a framework that has software and configurations that require you to set it up for you to run and access those networks. And they're not networks that are separate from the internet. They're actually overlay networks at this point. There are some alpha and beta networks that are trying to be sort of outside of the internet as is, but the major darknets that we're going to be looking on sit on top of what we understand as being the regular internet or the clear net. And the dark web, that's the composite of web content from all of these different darknet frameworks. And again, it requires specific software configurations or authorization to access. Why do I think this talk is worth giving? Because I think the vast misportrayals of the dark web and different darknet frameworks in the media, by law enforcement, or by government entities can easily lead to a skewed perspective of what that threat landscape actually is, and what sort of budget you should be putting towards it. Also, there's been a whole lot of new vendors in the space that are trying to sell you dark web insights at ridiculous numbers usually, and understanding what the threat landscape is actually like and how easy it is to go and look for yourself or someone on your team to do so can really help you in better molding, all right, how am I going to put resources towards maybe this particular facet of our threat modeling or threat assessment. So what makes these different darknet frameworks unique from one another? Well, I can't get away with not talking about Tor. It is definitely the largest and heaviest trafficked and the most talked about. It itself is privacy oriented, but a lot of the offerings on it are commercialized. That you can find all kinds of data dumps and hacker tools and stuff like that, but you got paid. OpenBazaar, this one is purely commercialized, and this is a newer one. It's not privacy oriented, but there are some optional privacy features you can use. To get an idea of what the user base being targeted is like, the two biggest currencies that are in use are US dollars and Bitcoin. That's followed by the euros, the pound sterling, Canadian dollars, and a good smattering of ruble use. I2P, arguably the second most well-known darknet framework. This one is indeed privacy-centric. It's based not necessarily on keeping the content private, so much as the identity of the users. And it has a balance between both ideologically oriented free information and also it does have some commercial aspects as well. In terms of the content itself and what languages you'll find, if you use just the major I2P official announcement nodes, the content you'll find there is mostly English. But if you also include the content on the third-party or unofficial nodes, the Russian language content far outweighs the English language. And then, of course, there are enclaves of Chinese language content, French language, and Japanese as well. There were a couple Brazilian, but not very many. That's Brazilian Portuguese. For Freenet, as opposed to necessarily making its focus the privacy of its users, it's the resiliency of its content to be able to protect itself and its network against censorship by an oppressive regime or by some other entity. Most of the content there's hardly any commercialization at all on Freenet. Most of the content there absolutely is free, and it's a lot of it's ideologically motivated. In terms of the users, the geographies that they're coming from, it's mostly the U.S. and the UK, or the U.S. and Europe rather, followed by Japan, Russia, and Brazil. A little more about Tor to give you an idea about like how long it's been around and what it uses. It's been around. It was publicly released in 2002, but it was in development by the U.S. government before that, before it was handed over to a public entity. It relies on the Onion Service Protocol. If you want to learn more about that, I'll put a link to the white paper at the end of this talk that goes much more into the technical weeds of the different topologies and different ways in which these networks are set up and the technology that it uses. This is mostly focused on privacy and security for internet users. Specifically, Tor wants to make it really easy for people to have a higher level of privacy while on the internet. And they do that by putting their browser bundle together so you don't have to do a whole lot of configuration yourself. I'll show you some numbers for Tor mean daily users, and then you can see that compared to some of the later numbers for the other darknet frameworks and see just how much of a bear Tor is in terms of user usage. So the US, Germany, and the UAE make up the large chunk of where users are coming from. The reason why the UAE is so high on that list is because for just about all of the Arab states in the area, they're all funneling through the UAE's major Tor nodes. Then again, Russia's following that up. As you've heard on media or for law enforcement announcements, you can find drugs, weapons, really overpriced weapons, hacking tools and guides. The hacking tools and guides that are for sale, most of them you can find for free on the ClearNet, so there's definitely malware. Most of it is malware that's been cracked before, and if you do find any listings for a piece of malware that's newer and hasn't really been reversed, that's going to cost you a lot more. Leaked databases you can find for sure. Usually those are used for account stuffer activities or account checker activities. But again, all of this is at a price. Nobody's giving these away for free, really, on Tor. Also, whenever you read or hear something about hitmen on the dark web, it's bullshit. Like, no professional contract killer is going to take some bitcoins from some kid angry on Xbox Live. Like, he's going to stay with organized crime because that's less liability. Besides all the gnarly stuff that you hear about, there's also some pretty cool other offerings on Tor, like a lot of whistleblower support. If they're finding they're not getting traction internally with their the entity that they work for, then they can anonymously give some evidence and some idea to these different whistleblower organizations that are external. There's also projects for censorship evasion from oppressive regimes and privacy from surveillance in general. A lot of those are still pretty much in their infancy, and there are ways for a determined state-backed entity with enough resources to get around those. There's a lot of personal blogs and forums. Most of the forums are like mundane topics that people might not feel real well revealing who they are talking about it, like maybe some rather raunchy fanfics or something like that. But also there's a lot of medical forums for people who have a certain medical issue and want to be able to talk to others that also have it, but are embarrassed or don't want their name connected to that. There's also a Tor Facebook portal for some reason. Facebook stood it up so you can anonymously log into your account that has all your information. I don't know. The new kid on the block, OpenBazaar. Again, this is like focused solely on e-commerce. Specifically, what they want to do is get away from the model of eBay and of Amazon and other outlets where you have to pay fees whenever you're selling things. So they don't have any fees for their transactions, and their system is peer-to-peer. The network itself uses the IPFS, the Interplanetary File System. Again, the longer paper goes more into that and how it works. But transactions themselves between buyers and sellers are based on Ricardian contracts. That's been around for quite a while, I think like 12 years now, and has been tested in quite a different number of applications for transactions. In terms of who's using this, the main language support that the developers have out now is for English, Brazilian Portuguese, and French, but they're currently developing more languages and starting to try and crowdsource it more. I believe the next one is Spanish, and then after that, Russian. In terms of the listings, as I mentioned before, it's mostly US dollars and Bitcoin. And you could see that, just by the sheer numbers, those are what most users are transacting in. So what sort of stuff can you buy on OpenBazaar right now? You can party. The prices are outrageous. But yeah, there's definitely just about any illicit substance you can find on there. You can get some IDs, passports. You could say that you graduated from Harvard and get it on fancy paper with raised lettering and everything. Also, if somebody's selling a passport for $1,000, especially a US passport, it's gonna be a piece of shit. Like, you're gonna be looking more at like $6,000 to $10,000 for a legit one. So I read. I don't have a bug out bag or anything. So there are some other things you can get, like hacked accounts for Snapchat. And if you want to do AstroTurf, mostly this is for AstroTurfing. So you buy a whole bunch of LinkedIn, Facebook, and Snapchat accounts, and then you can make it look like you have a whole bunch of followers and your business is totally legit. Streaming services, you can go ahead and buy those for cheaper than the monthly cost would be, but chances are it's going to get shut down in a few months, so your mileage may vary. Some hacking tools, you can definitely buy those. I understand why it says NSA, because there were some leaked NSA hacking tools, but they got a little happy with the 3-letter acronyms and added FBI and CIA, I guess, to seem legit. But yeah, it's mostly outdated software, like that WhatsApp Finder bug has been patched. Though that blue screen is really interesting because this is an account checker program that also has bot fingerprint evasion techniques, so human emulation techniques that like randomly move the mouse around the website and like will skip between different dialog boxes, maybe not in order, and will slow down how it's entering things over time. So it's not like, oh, it's obviously a bot because it's doing everything in a split second. And so I thought that was pretty neat because those are the sorts of things that a lot of the bot stopping and bot tracking vendor software usually looks at. So this was fun. This was somebody that was offering hacking services, hacking emails, bank accounts, school results. And so it was interesting to see that probably about a month later, instead of having their listing for hacking, all these accounts and stuff, now they offer consultation services for business intelligence, marketing operations, projects, and security. And it's the exact same contact information. So I thought that was interesting. And the reason why I started seeing these changes is because OpenBazaar is starting to block some of these more illicit listings. So it's not necessarily a free-for-all. I tried to find weapons. I found a grease gun and a Nerf Maverick that looks like it's been painted. It's a pretty good price, actually. I did find a flamethrower. So, I mean, you can get that, on the clear net from somebody who bought it from Elon Musk's company. Yes. Yeah, or clearing the snow, whatever. So those things are cute and funny and like, oh, drugs, hacking, but the vast majority of stuff on OpenBazaar, by far, is like really mundane stuff, like people selling their jewelry or people selling, their own original artwork. Excuse me. Phone cases, speakers. Now, I don't know if those speakers fell off the back of the truck or not, but I'm going to go with it's probably legit. There was one store that I was super excited about because they sold hard-to-find antique collector's books. And some of them were reasonably priced and pretty good. There's another couple of vendors that all they sell are cactuses, which is cute. And then somebody that makes their own clothing. As I mentioned before, OpenBazaar is starting to block the illicit offerings, but it's really weird how they're doing it because they're just blocking it from the main search results. The listings are still there, so if you have the direct link, you can still go to it. So third-party searches have started to pop up. They go to scrape and find all of those listings that have been taken down from the main search. Freenet. This one, there was a lot of interesting stuff I found on here. It's been around for a while. It was originally released in 2000, and it's really trying to be censorship resistant. And the way it does this is by using distributed data stores. And so if you take down one or a handful of nodes, you'll still be able to access the network's content or people's free sites just by contacting a different node. In terms of user demographics, you can see these numbers are quite a bit lower than Tor's, but still, I mean, a good chunk of people are using it. United States and then Europe, followed by Japan, Russia, and Brazil. And the leaked data that you can find is all free. Nobody's trying to get Bitcoin out of you for it. If you want to look up Ashley Madison dumps or Adult Friend Finder dumps to see how many bots were on there or to see if your boss is on there, you can do that. The emails from the French head of state, Emmanuel Macron, though I do want to put a little caveat note here. It has been confirmed that some of these emails, before they were released, were altered, likely by Eastern European actors. During the TTIP negotiations for trade rules and for copyright rules and stuff like that, the Greenpeace had an insider that was able to leak all of the confidential documents from that. So if you want to go back and read those, you can. This one's scary. So this is a dump of internal emails from Diebold employees who worked on Diebold's voting machines. And essentially the employees saying, like, these voting machines are terrible, they're really insecure, I don't know why people keep buying them. There's a lot of problems with them. And these are the machines that like 37 different states had. So cute. A couple of disparate groups that are under the heading anonymous by their own say-so got together and pulled together from a lot of different activities where they had gone into sheriff's office networks or into police precinct networks and gotten internal documents, mostly how-to docs. Things like, what's the digital forensic process for this particular police office? How do they pull artifacts from wireless routers? How do they investigate websites such as Craigslist? So you can know how law enforcement does those things step by step, including how they search cell phones, how they do captures of cell phone data and things like that. Because it is anti-censorship oriented, you do unfortunately find a bit of a few hate groups on there, mostly white supremacists. And they say in there about the reason why they're on Freenet is because on the ClearNet, all of their hosts kept kicking them off, rightly so. And so now the only place you'll find a lot of their content other than Stormfront is on Freenet. You'll also find a lot of things like poisoning handbooks. if you want to do that. But also, the one on the far left was much more interesting to me. It's an eco-terrorism handbook, like how to ruin logging equipment, how to take down oil pipelines, things like that. And it's obviously like some really smart engineers that know what they're talking about that are going into it. ALF, the Animal Liberation Front, still has an active presence on Freenet, and like mostly they're doing documentation of like their past activities and stuff like that. But there's also still some updated content from them on there. This one was cute. This was is a step-by-step guide in Chinese on how to assassinate Xi Jinping, the head of China. And it was weird because it's very, very dispassionate and like just like a checklist of things like, oh, this part of the buildings that you might be near have CCTV here, here, and here, so you'll want to take this route instead. And it's just like, this person thought way too much about this. There are blogs for how to write malware and how to avoid decompilation or reverse engineering of your malware. You can find those on the ClearNet too, but it was just interesting to see them there. This one was absurd. So this is an anonymous collective, and how they set themselves apart from the rest of Anonymous is they're ham radio enthusiasts that are scanning the radio waves for, I don't know, threats and protecting us from them. They never go into detail about what those threats are, so I don't know, it could be aliens, could be the government, human trafficking, I don't know, they wouldn't say. But they really, really like ham radio and masks. There's a lot of socio-political sites, a lot of libertarian sites and blogs, a lot of anarcho-capitalist sites, whatever that means, a lot of Agorist sites, and anarcho-communists. Again, those are funny to me. Like, so no central government, but central planning. I don't know how that works. Maybe somebody can tell me about it. But there are a lot of other things that like aren't scary or quote unquote dark, and the vast majority of the content is just hobbyist stuff. There are a bunch of different social networks, some of them active, some of them just people continuously saying, is anybody here? There's a bunch of code sharing initiatives, a GitHub clone, where people are actively building stuff together, most of it mundane. There is just a metric crap ton of amateur novelists on Freenet. It's amazing how much content there is. And it's not all like weird furry fanfic either. It's like there's like legit high fantasy and sci-fi that's pretty good, and I think they should get published. But yeah, if you want to read some new content that's not like published out widely, go check out Freenet. Though my favorite site had to be this GeoCities looking John Wayne site. I mean, this is a static picture, so it doesn't show it, but it legit had a scrolling, blinking marquee going across it. I was surprised there weren't those little flame GIFs too. But it was just like wave files of John Wayne saying stuff and like quotes and stuff about his life and where he grew up, and it was just very wholesome. I2P is a mixed bag, as I mentioned before, and it's looking at both commerce options, but also it has its fair share of ideologically motivated free content. It's initially released in 2003, so it's also been around for a while. And it uses an anonymizing P2P distributed communication layer to try and keep monitoring of its users and its users' activity to a minimum. Though, if you can control enough nodes, like I believe the Dutch government did very early on in I2P's inception, then they can de-anonymize people. In terms of numbers, more users than Freenet for sure, but the vast majority of them in the United States and Russia. Some interesting things I found. The cryptocurrency that's in most use on I2P was not Bitcoin, it was Monero, which was cool to see. Then there was also a large selection of users of Ghost Coin. I study cryptocurrencies. I had no idea what Goscoin is, so I'm like, oh, what is this? But there are mining pools, exchanges, and tumbling services for both. And Goscoin is really I2P centric. It has hardly any ClearNet footprint. But their description of what it is a digital currency based on blockchain technology. Okay, yeah. It allows instant payments worldwide with focus on privacy and security of its users. All right, so it tries to mask its users and what they're doing. It uses Russian government standard cryptography. That doesn't mean anything. But they do give access to the code base, so you can go and review it yourself to see if you think that they're using legit crypto and they're not just like rolling their own primitives like idiots. Don't roll your own crypto. And the vast majority of uses I've seen for it, it was money laundering. So, if you want to use Spectre or Meltdown and don't want to like find out how it works and build it yourself, somebody posted for free the tool in C, a how-to guide on using it, and for some reason PDF copies of the Wikipedia pages for the attacks, in case you don't want to go to Wikipedia, I guess. But yeah, that's free. Then there was somebody I saw that had posted on a number of different forums on I2P or EAP sites. This is a Russian and English speaker that is trying to hire botnet herders or botnet owners, saying that, you know, if you have a mil plus machines on your botnet, I'll pay you $25 for 15 minutes of use. I mean, that adds up. That's pretty good money. There were people selling O-Days. They were crappy O-Days. Like 2 of them were O-Days for Internet Explorer. Like, who wants that? And then there's a new hacker community that's being announced there, and that was interesting because to get access to that one, you can't pay to access it. They give you a target that you don't know beforehand, like a website, and then you have to prove that you've hacked that target. And then there's also a botnet that you can hire, the Deucalion, which is a really crappy botnet and easy to block. Don't buy it. The most interesting thing I found on I2P, though, was this hacktivist collective. They say that they're service for SecOps, sysadmins, and activists, but they provide like a couple of tools that are based on their site, so you don't have to use your own IP address. You know, you can go and look at hacked cameras. You can go and spider a website for vulnerabilities. You can go and use their low orbit ion cannon, which is just a terrible tool. But they also taught live classes, like legit interactive live classes on writing malware, hacking different websites. But the last two, the advanced web app exploitation and the exotic web application vulnerabilities, I went through and looked at the archive of those, and the teacher definitely knew their stuff and knew what they were talking about. And it was really well done. At the end, they posted a link to their slides. Now, the bin that was holding their slides had a username attached to it, a pretty unique one. They weren't very good at OPSEC. That username links directly back to a director in a very large firm in our industry that sells web application protection software. So, I mean, I guess it's a sustainable business model. Like, you teach hacktivists how to hack web apps, and then you sell, you know, the web app protection as well. But I'm not going to out them. But yeah, OPSEC is hard. So that stuff's the interesting stuff. The vast majority, again, the same as the others, it's mundane stuff, hobbyists, people just playing around. There are gateways for cross-traffic to other darknet frameworks. Cindy, which is mostly file sharing. ZeroNet, which is new, doesn't have a whole lot of users yet. Tor, of course, and then there's a Telegram portal, mostly used by Russian language speakers. There are also social media instances on there. No Facebook on this one, but they do have a few diaspora instances. Overchan, don't Google that. OneLawn, Lifebox, and then some basic like PHP forums. There's Git services, free encrypted file stores, There's a Usenet network running on I2P. Pastebin clones. If you don't want to rely on MIT's PGP key server, there's one for you there on I2P. I don't know if I would trust it more or less. There's a not shady at all.ru registrar you can use on I2P. Yeah, it's totally not for malicious activities. The largest and most active forum I found on I2P, though, was a gardening forum. It was great. It was like people talking about like, oh, my yield of lavender was kind of low, and I think I might have a fungal infection in the bed. It's like, oh, well, you can make this tea and pour it over there like every 2 weeks, and it'll help. And I don't know, it was very wholesome. It was great. If you want to play chess, but you want to do so anonymously, you can do that too. Take that, Yahoo Games. Does anybody know what Zinner's Cards is? Okay, so this is supposedly an ESP test where you have to guess the next symbol that's going to be on the card, and there's an interactive version of that on there so you can see if you have ESP or not. You don't. There's a really cool ASCII art database, which, I mean, the only place I really still see those is in the demo scene, so it was nice to see that. There was this really Angel Fire looking edgy 13-year-old in a basement probably service called Osiris's Tomb, and it's all like his like original emo artwork, and God, I'm glad my stuff is not still on the internet from that time period. Yeah, again, it was another chat room for people to talk, and it was mostly people saying, is anybody here? If anybody can figure out what the hell this is, I would be grateful. I think it's an art installment. I don't think it's a puzzle because I sat there for like an hour going through each iteration of it, and whenever you click on it, it changes the colored dots. And I don't know if you can see it because of the lighting, but each dot has an arrow pointing out of it from, to a different direction. And when I was clicking through it, it seemed to be pretty random. I couldn't find a pattern, but I think it's just an art installment, but I'd like to find out if it's something more. And if you want to, I'll put my email at the end, and if you want a link to that, I can send it to you. All right, so what's the conclusions, or the set of conclusions that we can draw from these things? The dark web and the dark net's content in general isn't nearly as dark as the media or law enforcement would lead you to believe. I mean, it makes sense that they would present it that way because they get more, oohs and ahs and clicks. And law enforcement or government would then get, a better argument for a larger budget next year, things like that. So there are definitely incentives for that. But if you go and look for yourself, the types of content that's going to be on there that are going to be a direct threat to your business are pretty low. If you're a bank, it might make sense for you to be on the lookout for credit card dumps. But for most other content, you don't really need to spend a whole lot of money on getting fancy third-party vendor stuff for it. Most of the illicit activity is actually still occurring on the ClearNet. If you're looking for human trafficking, you just go to it used to be Backpage, but Craigslist, things like that. That's where you're going to find the vast majority of it. So in looking at the darknet frameworks themselves, you can get somebody on your team to just set up a couple boxes to be able to get access to this stuff. And every now and then you might want to check for do one of the dumps have your user's information in it? You want to give them a heads up to rotate that password or something like that. Then you don't need to pay out the nose for another third-party vendor. You can do that yourself pretty easily. So essentially, don't lose sleep over the dark web. I know some CISOs have been doing that. I've had people that come up to me after this talk and tell me, hey, I had my CISO sit down with me and be like, show me the dark web right now. We need to know about our threats. It's like, well, first of all, which part? But yeah, so and looking at your risk framework and your threat modeling and your resource investment out of that, you really want to take into account just how much of this content is mundane stuff and how few users are still on the dark web. It's not a whole lot of people that use the internet that you also use the dark web. There's the link to the longer paper. Also, if you want to slide into my DMs, there's my Twitter handle and my email address. If you don't want to ask a question now, or something comes up to you later that you're like, oh, I want to ask about this. So now I'm open for questions. Yeah.
Is there any music out there? Is there any music out there?
There is both original works, but most of the music is like people just sharing MP3s. There are a couple streaming services, but really because of the lack of so the robustness and the speed of most of these frameworks is tied directly to the number of users because they double as nodes as well, connection nodes. You're not going to get the speed to be able to stream like a video, but there are some audio streaming services. Oh, yes.
Question. So you convince your boss that you want to conduct the research activity, let's say data dumps and so on, but then official statement is going to come because the associated with this case of people strong. So how do you do it, let's say from enterprise perspective or environment, you want to do this research, do for data dumps, passwords and so on, without getting company compromised or associated with your research?
Yeah, so I mean, don't come at it from your company IP pool, for one. But also, what some companies have done to get around that is they've set up a sort of a third-party entity in like the Cayman Islands or something like that. So it's not directly tied to the parent company, and that way they can do their black budget stuff that way. I know there's a lot of underground economy and malware researchers that they want to be able to buy 0 days and buy malware and things like that, but they don't want it tied back to the company budget. So they set up a separate entity to do that purchasing. And that's something you could do for that. And use like a VPN that's based in Eastern Europe or something like that, or a jump box from a bulletproof host, something like that. So it's pretty obfuscated who's on there and who's coming from where. Mm-hmm.
On that point, though, I mean, if there's not a whole lot that's really that bad out there, do you really have to go through all that work and trouble to really set something up, or do it from Starbucks? Right?
I mean, yeah, it's really what's your risk profile for you and for your company, and is the type of content that's going to be on there really worth the investment? And I don't know a lot of vendors that will let our dark web vendors that will answer that. Like they're like, oh no, but you can see into the dark web. Well, yeah, but you don't have access to vetted forums. You don't have access to closed groups. You're just doing scraping and keyword searches. Like,
how bad do you think those vetted forums are comparatively from what you're able to just natively search?
The worst ones are on ICQ, QQ, Telegram, and ClearNet forums. Like most of the ones that are on the dark web, it's just like large groups of cyber criminals aren't going to go through that hassle when they've already got systems that work.
Other questions?
Great, thank you all very much.
Let's have a round of applause.